Carlotta, and I'm 38. I was born and raised in Los Angeles. I live in LA right now. When I was 25, I was diagnosed with a disease called myelodysplastic syndrome, which is a primary bone marrow failure syndrome. Most of the time, it progresses into acute myeloid leukemia, so AML, which is a very aggressive form of leukemia. And actually, most of the time, it is common in people that are like is 70 years old or older. So it's not typical to be diagnosed at 25 with this sort of rare bone marrow disease. And so we were introduced to a few organizations that helped us along the way. And one of those, obviously the largest, was Be the Match. And my unique sort of relationship with it was, I'm half Japanese and half Caucasian. But when you're diagnosed with a primary bone marrow failure disease, the only cure still to this day is a bone marrow transplant or a stem cell transplant. And in order to do that, you have to have a donor. And if your sibling is not a match, then you are, forced to look at the registry. Unfortunately, minorities and mixed race people are just not well represented on that registry. I was very lucky in the fact that my disease was really slow progressing. It was stable for a long time. I really had no symptoms. I had no physical issues really. Fast forward to 2017. This is almost 10 years, well, pretty much 10 years later. I started becoming symptomatic, and still, like, my body just wasn't like working properly. I just knew, like, inherently something was wrong. So just 4 months later, not even 4 months later, I was transfusion dependent. But there was this one person who had come up I believe she got registered in 2011. And so in December, and amazingly enough, the donor from 2011 was still on the registry in 2017. And they contacted her and said, "Are you still willing to donate?" And she said, yes. I was very, very lucky. But yeah, I came out, and I've been incredibly blessed that it's been successful. And, 3 years later, I'm doing really great. And the disease is gone, which is amazing.
You're still very passionate about getting people who are mixed race or minorities to sign up. And that's kind of like the goal of this series, is to really try to educate and allow people to really learn about what the registry is. Now, what advice would you give to someone who may be hesitant about joining the match or Be the Match?
But I would say to someone who's hesitant that there are real people who their only hope at living is a donor. That was the case in my experience. I think the hesitation for most people comes from the fact that they think, oh, well, I heard it's really painful, or I think it's scary. And that is completely understandable. The biggest part of that time is filling out a form. The other part of the registration process is a cheek swab. So it's literally a Q-tip in your mouth and you're scrubbing the side of your cheek for 30 seconds. That's it. I mean, it takes no more than 10 minutes to potentially save someone's life. And considering the fact that I have now been on the recipient end of that, I mean, I think about my donor. Her name is Maggie. I think about her almost every day. I think about her in the sense of, like, thank God for Maggie, because without her, I would be dead. And so for people who are hesitant, I would just say, like, if you were in this position, you would want someone like a Maggie to say, yeah, okay, sure. Understand the actual process, The registration process is absolutely the easiest you can possibly do. There is no needle involved. And then the donation process, typically, it's just like giving blood. Think about what you actually are doing. Think about that person on the other end who's waiting to get that. It took me 10 years to wait for mine. And now I have a whole lifetime ahead of me. I couldn't be more grateful.
What advice would you give to patients who are currently waiting to be a match?
Waiting is very hard. You're going to go through good days and bad days, and that is okay. My advice is to have really supportive people around you to continually give you that hope and say, it's going to be okay. We're going to figure it out. Remembering that you have a whole group of people that are pulling for you, it gives you motivation. So there is a lot of hope out there to cling on to, and you just kind of have to it's an exercise. It's like working out your body. You've got to keep working out your mind and staying positive. And organizations like Be the Match, I became so involved with, because these are like regular people that dedicate their entire life to registering people for the registry.
What is your plans in the future, personally, also with Be the Match, with your podcast? Just like, what does it look like for you in the future?
I'm going to rule the world. No, I'm just kidding. No, I mean, what's really exciting is I don't really know what the future holds. I mean, I know I will always be involved with Be the Match. And like I said, when you go through something like this, is very humbling, and to come out of it alive and healthy, I feel as though it's, my responsibility to pay it forward. My hope is that I can be able to see some really truly amazing stuff happen in the future in terms of care treatment for, blood cancers or other types of, immune diseases that affect a lot of people. I'll always be kind of continuing this work, paying forward forever.